Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the franchise. I'm your host, Daniel Ehrenberg.
I'm your co-host, Henry Papali. Welcome to the party.
That's right. And today we're talking about one of my favorite all-time film franchises, Scream. Are you ready, buddy?
I'm ready.
We're going into that horror genre. And, there's obviously a big history in terms of franchises in the horror genre. And we'll probably do another one around October, because that's the scariest time of year.
That it is. It is.
And but we're gonna start with Scream, which kind of is a horror franchise, but not like your classical horror franchise,
right?
Because it is more of like a whodunit than a horror movie, which is kind of interesting. And I think they kind of are aware of that. There's that score by Marco Beltrami, previously seen in Die Hard 4 and 5 on this podcast.
That's right.
And it's not a horror score. It's a fucking drama score.
Yeah, it's well, we'll get into it. I mean, I wanted you to set up everything you want to say.
Happy
because I got
to do that. Listen,
please do.
Look, I'm a Scream guy. I've seen these movies a billion times. Henry is not. I think Henry's a little intimidated to talk during this episode, but I want him to I think it's interesting if you give your thoughts on top of mine. Okay, listen, Scream. The first one, it was released December 20th, 1996. It had a budget, December 20th, too, right around Christmas. It's like a weird decision.
Very odd.
A budget of $15 million. Small.
Very.
And a box office of $173 million. Wow. Big. Directed by horror master Wes Craven. But he wasn't at the top of his game at this moment. His previous two films were Nightmare on Elm Street 7. He returned to that series. We'll cover it.
Yeah.
And Vampire in Brooklyn.
Masterpiece.
Yeah, masterpiece. But it was written by a young upstart named Kevin Williamson. And this was his first screenplay that was made. And Henry, I don't know if you know this about me, but there was a period in my life where I was what you might call a Kevin Williamson devotee.
I believe that. I believe that. I've heard you talk about the man. Yes. I
read a biography about him around this time, a quickie biography, which was called From Scream to Dawson's Creek. And it was a thing. I would go see a movie just because it was written by Kevin Williamson.
Yeah, wow.
And that's why I've seen movies like I Know What You Did Last Summer,
right, and
The Faculty,
right,
and Teaching Mrs. Tingle, which was his directorial debut.
Yeah.
And I loved those movies. I did. I'm sorry.
Well,
and Dawson's Creek, by the way, I watched every episode because that was his sort of autobiographical show.
So that's why you watched Dawson's Creek, because of him? I didn't know that.
I watched Dawson's Creek because Kevin Williamson in interviews said this is based on my life.
Oh, I did not know that's why you watched it.
I was interested in Kevin Williamson.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I always thought you just watched that because you're a TV guy. I didn't know it was because of him.
No, I got into the WB network sort of after that show because it already had Buffy, which I loved, and then Dawson's Creek was Kevin Williamson. So it's like if the WB is the network that's hiring the Joss Whedons and Kevin Williamsons of the world, I'm going to watch that network.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to say, when you said earlier about being intimidated to talk about it, I'm more intimidated because of my opinion of the movies.
Oh, feel free to criticize these movies.
Yeah, I know. We always do. But it's one of those things. I know they're so beloved to you.
The first one is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you said, it was funny because you said right away you made kind of a statement I didn't expect. Where I get, maybe it's for our listeners less than for me, but you said how it's not really a horror movie, and like my response to that is kind of like, well, no kidding, because it's like a meta movie.
Yeah,
you know?
and
so.
And
Yeah.
if I may,
Yes.
I saw this movie for the first time in June of 1997.
Oh, okay.
I didn't see it in theaters. I was young. I
Right.
was turning 11, like 1 month later.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a kid.
Right.
And this is the first horror movie I ever saw, Scream.
Wow. Really?
My dad tried to show me The Exorcist a couple of years earlier, and
Oh my.
and I got scared. And
Yeah, I guess you would.
Yeah, and I ran to my bedroom. I couldn't take The Exorcist.
That's-
It was
well,
the scene where Linda Blair is, she's in the bed and she's like going up and down and up and down.
Right.
That fucking freaked me out. I could not handle The Exorcist.
Well, you were 9?
I was probably around 8 or 9. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I couldn't deal with it. But Scream, when it came out on VHS, we rented it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was summer. I very distinctly remember this. It was like the week school let out in June.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fucking leisurely. It was like a Saturday morning. My mom was there, and we put on Scream. And it fucking changed my life.
So Scream being your first horror movie, you would have had no referential ideas that were happening through what the entire movie is based about.
Yes, it's crazy that Scream is my first
Which-
horror movie because it's like when people tell you, like, oh, I'm trying out superhero comics. I'm gonna read Watchmen. It's a deconstruction of horror movies.
Right.
But I didn't get that. I took it at face value just as like a whodunit. And I
Right.
liked whodunits at the time. As a kid, I read like Robert B. Parker books, and I was into that movie Clue. I liked Agatha Christie. Like, that's what I latched onto. But
Okay.
this brought me to other horror movies. I watched the movie Halloween because I saw Scream.
Oh, wow. So, needless to say, we're coming at this from way different life
Yeah,
experiences.
tell me when you first saw it.
Well, it's funny. I was 18 when it came out, and I remember having no interest in seeing it at all. But I remember it being a big deal, and like coworkers and people around me were talking about it. But I just didn't care. So I don't remember the first time I saw it, but I'll tell you this. It must have been probably 3 or 4 years later, like on TV, and I liked it a lot. And I had never seen any of the sequels. I'll just put that out there right now.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, but the first movie, I seen it several times, and I always liked it. I never loved it, but I always liked it. But now, when I like rewatched it, I really had a different take on it. I would have gone into this movie I went into this movie with a very different idea of how I would come out like reviewing it, and when it was over, I had a completely different view of it,
Less positive?
much less positive.
That's really interesting and upsetting.
Yeah, I told you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess one of the things to get into it. I mean, do you want to say the plot a little bit? Or?
Yeah, okay. Well, Scream, it takes place in a small town, Woodsboro, California. And Sidney Prescott is our main character, played by Neve Campbell. Her mom was murdered a year ago, and now there's a series of murders that seem to be connected to her mother's death, even though the killer of her mother, the supposed killer of her mother, Cotton Weary, is on death row.
Okay. That's about all we need, or?
That's all we need plot-wise, yeah. But
Right.
let me just go into like the sort of setup, like how this movie was made,
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so Kevin Williamson was a fledgling writer, and he was in a writer's workshop, just with friends in his like hometown. And one night he was scared. He got freaked out by something, and he wrote like 10 pages, and it was the opening sequence. All right, so yeah, the 5 pages he wrote that night or 5 or 10 pages, I can't remember, were the opening of Scream. It was that first scene with Drew Barrymore.
Okay.
And he thought nothing of it. But he went into that writing class the next time. He had like a completed, totally worked over, like fucking he poured his soul into teaching Mrs. Tingle. It was called Killing Mrs. Tingle at the time. They changed it to Teaching Mrs. Tingle because of Columbine.
Mm.
Ugh. That's the worst offense of Columbine, by the way.
Oh my God.
And that and delaying the Buffy finale because it had a school blowing up.
Right.
Season 3. Okay. But you know, that didn't go over great, Killing Mrs. Tingle. And he showed them those like 10 pages of Scream, and they were like, "You need to fucking write this."
Yeah. Okay.
And so he did. He expanded it into a screenplay. He was happy with the screenplay, and then he thought he could possibly sell it, and so he came up with little pitch ideas for a second and third movie. And this is interesting for the franchise. The reason he did this was, quote, he thought that he could sell it not as a movie, but as a franchise.
Yeah. A lot of foresight there.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So the original title of this movie was Scary Movie.
Right.
And so weird, considering a couple years later there would be a direct parody of this movie called Scary Movie.
A parody of a parody.
Yeah, which is so stupid. I know. We'll cover it on the podcast. It's a franchise. So that shit worked. Kevin Williamson sold this movie to Miramax for $400,000. Pretty good. There was a time there where Kevin Williamson was like the hot screenwriter in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. I remember there was an article in the Hollywood Reporter at the time. I can't remember who it was, but it was like sort of a fledgling writer, and he said that you can't get like screenwriters don't get treated well at Miramax unless their name is Kevin.
Really?
And he was referring to Kevin Smith and Kevin Williamson.
That's what I figured.
Yeah,
that's the only other Kevin I could think of.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get down to the movie.
All right.
What do you think, buddy?
Well, it's not scary.
It's not trying to be.
Yeah, I think it is. A lot of critics also thought it was scary. It's not funny.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. See, here's the question. It's not the first meta movie. I mean, there were tons before that, but I would say probably it really started a trend, right? I mean, of movies being self-referential, like at least revitalizing that in a genre.
Especially horror movies. Like,
right.
I remember like a year later, there was Urban Legend.
Yeah.
Do you remember that movie?
Yes, I do. There's
a line in that movie at the end where like the killers get revealed, and I believe the killer is Rebecca Gayheart, who was in Scream 2. And someone says, "You're crazy," and she says, "I prefer the term eccentric." And there was a line in Scream.
That's right.
Like, you're crazy. We prefer the term psychotic, and it's, I mean, just a year after Scream, movies are legit just quoting it.
Right.
Like, that's how much Scream changed horror. Because before Scream, the franchises were Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, and Halloween, and they were sort of long in the tooth.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So Scream was something new. Scream was something horror fans hadn't seen before.
Yeah. Well, now the thing is that the movie is now 20 years old. And I guess watching it, I guess I hadn't seen it in, I don't know, maybe 10 years, something like that. And I guess I didn't realize it how much a movie of its time it really is. Like, even though it's referencing things that are old, I find that the movie itself is dated now, and that may be because of the proliferation of independent horror movies, and they're all over the place more than ever before. They're like,
yeah, and they can
everywhere.
thank Scream.
Yeah. Well, that may be true, but so when I'm watching it, I guess just a lot of the jokes just don't. They're so obvious and don't really hold up to me. I didn't remember feeling that way before.
But there's also, I mean, we talk about Scream in joke terms, and the jokes are almost always just commenting on the fact that it's a horror movie. Things like, oh, you should be, horror movies are all the same. It's some big-breasted girl who can't act who should be going out the front door when she's running up the stairs.
Right, which
Right?
in 1996
Was an interesting statement to make, and now it's
Exactly.
fairly obvious. But there's also just other things in the movie that I appreciate that totally are just referencing horror. Like, to me, when I got into Comedy Bang Bang, it was like, that's where comedy should go. Like, if you are a comedian that is interested in comedy, that's where you should be. Like, it's a hub.
Yeah.
And that's how I see Scream. Like, to me, Scream is like the center of the horror genre.
Right.
And everything orbits around it.
Okay.
And so there's things in this movie like early on, Billy, played by Skeet Ulrich, goes. I know.
Can I say my David Spade joke that I always think of when I think of him?
Did he have a David Spade?
Oh, I love it.
What was it?
It's all I ever think about when I ever see Skeet Ulrich, which isn't often. But on one of his Hollywood Minutes, he put up a picture of Skeet Ulrich, and he goes, "Hey, Skeet, Johnny Depp called. He wants his DNA back."
I kind of remember that, actually. I will say there was a period in my life where I saw movies because Scream people were in them.
That's a lot of movies.
Yeah, like I saw the movie Chill Factor because Skeet Ulrich was in it.
Oh, my.
And I saw Ready to Rumble because David Arquette was in it.
And Ride with the Devil. Did you see that?
Probably just because of Ang Lee. But who was in that?
It's garbage. Skeet Ulrich.
Criterion.
Ugh, bloated Southern propaganda.
Yeah,
But
it's
anyway.
the second worst movie on the Criterion Collection after Armageddon.
Yeah.
But so when he goes to like visit her early in the movie, and he's speaking totally in movie terms, he says, we used to be an NC-17, now we're just sort of a PG.
Right.
Now, during that scene, lightly in the background, you can hear an acoustic, very slow, mournful cover of "Don't Fear the Reaper" by Blue
Yes.
Oyster Cult.
Yes, I made a note of
And
that.
the reason for that is because when Jamie Lee Curtis is driving out to babysit in the original Halloween, that's what she's listening to in the car.
Yes, she is.
So there's just things like that I appreciate. Like, Scream is important. It comes across important. Like, Kevin Williamson and Wes Craven have something to say about horror, and you might say it's shallow, but I think it's worthwhile.
Well, here's the thing. So Jamie Lee Curtis is listening to "Don't Fear the Reaper," so that's a Halloween nod. Billy's last name is Loomis, so that's a Halloween nod for Dr. Loomis in Halloween.
Sam Loomis, yeah.
So there's all these references, which brings me back again, not to hammer the point, but I think it also really does speak to our different experiences of the movie. Where, like, when I would have seen this originally, I was like, oh wow, that's very clever, that's cool. And now it's me and the time that has passed where it's not as fresh. Like when it came out, that's a fresh thing to do, but it's sticking itself into a time period.
But I think that's because Scream changed the genre so much. Now it seems old hat because everybody does it.
No, but that's not true. I don't agree with that. I don't think that everyone does a self-referential horror movie. I mean, I think movies are still going for the old school things that Scream is making fun of. I mean, to say that every horror movie, or not, I know you're not saying every horror movie, but to say that most horror movies that are made now are aping Scream or taking ideas from Scream.
They're aping something. They're not aping Scream. But you look at the horror movies that people love today, things like It Follows and The Babadook, like they're visually referencing older movies.
Yes, they are, but not in a jokey way and not in a way that is supposed to be taken ironically. Like
but the thing I like about Scream, I didn't want to go into this just defending fucking Scream. It's just...
Then don't defend...
the thing I like about it, to me, and this might not be the case for you, is it's not only a self-referential horror movie, it works as a movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think the script, just as a whodunit, is great.
Okay. Yeah, like a genuine mystery.
Yeah, I think it works for me. And here's another thing that's sort of underreported about Scream. You know that my favorite thing in the world is Bottle Episode.
Yeah, that's true.
I like any movie where characters are trapped somewhere together. It's a flaw of mine. I like any movie like that. And Scream, there's a party that starts 1 hour into this hour and 50-minute movie. And that's the rest of the movie.
That's true. I didn't remember that when I watched it, and kind of mental note made that like, oh, okay, I forgot that like they're stuck in this one environment, because the rest of the movie, the first half, they're kind of all over the place.
Yeah, well,
right.
But it's a $15 million picture, so
yeah,
much of it takes place at Matthew Lillard's parents' house.
Is that why you think?
I think it was in the original script, and I think that's kind of part of the reason Dimension bought it, because they thought they could make it on the cheap because of that.
Right. Well, I like I like Drew Barrymore's presence in it. I thought that was a nice touch. You know, I liked that I read that she wanted to actually be in the lead role that Neve Campbell took.
Yes, she was originally cast as Sidney Prescott, and she had to drop out, but the studio liked that Drew Barrymore's presence in the film was getting attention from other agencies and things. It sort of gave the movie some clout, because horror was dead at the time, basically. And, and that attracted other actors, so maybe they couldn't have gotten, big TV actors like Neve Campbell and Courtney Cox if Drew Barrymore wasn't in the movie.
And all those people were pretty much just kind of TV people, weren't they?
We are... Party of Five was on the air at the time. I think Friends had just finished its second season.
Oh, was that early?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
These are TV actors.
And the Tori Spelling reference, so that was obviously a reference to her time on, I guess, 90210, and then post that.
90210 was still on the air, and she came to do a cameo in Scream 2.
Right.
That the Scream was so big at the time that she didn't give a shit that they shit talked her in the first one. She thought it would be a funny thing to do.
Right, yeah. So I have a question for you, and this ties into like my thing with the irony and the ironic thing, like because you talked about you mentioned Comedy Bang Bang, and like how it's where you thought things should go in that direction of that genre.
It seemed like that's where comedy is going when I first heard it.
So now, like, we're definitely we've been in the age, I'd say, probably for the last decade or more, where pretty much if you're not an ironic comic, if you're not commenting, and what can I say? I mean, our humor alone, we're very, we love that stuff. But do you think that because of Scream's take on that kind of genre, the irony, that does that like almost kind of put it above criticism? In other words, do I have some kind of, and this is not to make you defensive, this is just, do I have some contemporary obligation to have a Pavlovian response of unmitigated praise for the movie?
No, I think many people don't respect Scream the way they should.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that is that it gave birth to so many bad movies. Like, it sort of revitalized the horror genre in terms of mainstream success, but none of those movies were good.
Can you think of any example, or they're just like...
I mean, Urban Legend is a great example, but there's also like Final Destination,
right?
And Saw came soon after. Like it was like Scream made horror movies palatable to the public again, but I don't think it necessarily led to so many good movies.
Yeah. And probably also what led to the revitalization was probably because of so many big names in it, right? Because also, but to your prior point, with the horror movie genres just pretty much dying at that point, they had begun to star like nobodies, and like all those Jason,
like
films
Paul Michael Rudd. Paul Rudd's in Halloween 6 credit. Paul Michael Rudd.
Paul Michael Rudd. Yeah. So I mean, so this movie all of a sudden is a horror build, pretty much, is a horror movie at the time with all these big names in it. So maybe it made it also like more respectable to star in horror movies. Don't you think? I mean, like if you're
100%.
Yeah, like your agent comes to you and says, "Look, we got a horror movie." Prior to Scream, you'd be like, not interested, But after Scream, it was probably bandwagon time for like a bunch of people.
Yeah, I've seen interviews with Sarah Michelle Gellar where she didn't want to audition for Buffy because she thought that was a stupid title, and she said, "Well, beyond Buffy, I want to like sort of establish my drama credentials."
Right.
And so she said she'd never do a horror movie. And then she pops up in that Scream 2. And she said it was just because like Scream changed the game.
Yeah. How long was Buffy, when did that premiere, that show?
Buffy premiered between Scream and Scream 2.
Oh, okay. So it was late 90s.
Yeah. January, or I believe March of 97 is when Buffy premieres.
Okay. So she was right in the correct time to do this. Yeah. Talk a little bit to me about your opinion of Wes Craven in general. His contributions to this film, and just your kind of feeling on him in general.
He's one of the most important filmmakers of all time. To me, it's like Beatles versus Stones with Wes Craven and John Carpenter.
Okay, that's interesting.
Where the Beatles were experimental and tried things and were huge, and the Stones just were straight ahead rock and roll, and they were dirty and gritty and fucked up. And to me, John Carpenter is the Beatles and Wes Craven is the Stones in terms of horror. And I love Wes Craven. I prefer John Carpenter. I'll say that. And Scream is probably my favorite Wes Craven movie. Probably close with the first Nightmare on Elm Street. But I think he's an important director, and he's made a lot of good movies.
Okay. Yeah, because that's a really interesting comparison, because obviously in real life, as you know, I'm a Stones guy.
Yes, and I'm a Beatles guy.
Right, but I'm way, way more a John Carpenter guy. I mean, I was looking at Wes Craven's filmography, and I can't find a single movie that I actually even like.
I like some of his littler ones, like The People Under the Stairs and The Hills Have Eyes, and
Don't like.
Yeah, I know.
Shocker.
What's the one? His first film?
Last House on the Left.
Yeah, I like that movie.
I don't.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I was looking him over, and I'm just trying to figure out, like, I know everyone calls him, the master of horror and all that, and I feel like a lot of that might have to do with the creation of Nightmare on Elm Street, and like all of the fame that garnered him, because I feel like when I'm watching, this isn't just really Scream, this is more him in general, but like I don't feel like his handle, and it's just, I guess, a totally personal thing, but we also get into what our opinion of things are in what we think objectively. Like, I don't think he's just as talented as Friedkin or Romero or Hitchcock or Carpenter or Cronenberg or Kubrick or even De Palma.
I agree with every single name you said.
Yeah, and so it kind of baffles me as to how he was able to keep working, essentially, with
oh, please. He's overrated, maybe, but he's made a lot of good movies, and he's made successful movies. That's why he's able to keep working.
Right.
He captures the zeitgeist. Like, a year before Scream, he made Vampire in Brooklyn. He was like, that shit didn't work at all. Let me try something else.
How did that capture a zeitgeist?
What?
Vampire in Brooklyn.
No, I'm saying it totally failed to. And so 1 year later, he fucking makes Scream.
Right. Yeah.
It's great, and he fucking stuck with it, too. Wes Craven, this is the first franchise we're talking about. Same guy every movie.
That's true. Well, they were big financial hits, right? Like pretty much all of them, if not critical.
The first two were.
The third and fourth one didn't make good deal of money?
The fourth one tanked bad.
Oh, okay.
The third one, if they continued to make money, they would have just kept making them, man.
Right. Well, but there was such a big gap, right, between 3 and 4.
11 years.
Yeah. Wow. I wonder what brought him back to that.
Because Kevin Williamson came back. That's why.
He was absent on the third one, right?
He didn't do the third one. And they had a good working relationship. Between Scream 3 and Scream 4, they did Cursed together.
Yeah, that's bad.
That's not a bad movie.
I didn't.
It's underrated.
Oh, yeah. I didn't care for it.
The Jesse Eisenberg, Christina Ricci werewolf film.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not great, but I like it, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
I think Kevin Williamson is just one of these writers. I like listening to his dialogue.
Sure.
Like,
well, I think that also he writes a certain type of dialogue that you and me differ on, or like I thought of this when I was watching Scream. Like, his dialogue reminds me of why, like, you like. This might be a really out there example, but like where you've explained to me one of the reasons where you think I don't like Community, and you really do.
Yeah.
Like you told me a long time ago, you said, like, I didn't like. There's a certain type of written dialogue in Community that I don't care for, whereas opposed to like something like Last Man on Earth or Curb Your Enthusiasm, or which really isn't scripted, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
what was it that
like
you called?
naturalistic dialogue.
Okay.
Where I feel like Kevin Williamson falls into sort of the Kevin Smith or Aaron Sorkin kind of thing, where it's such a specific type of dialogue where either you're in it or you're not.
Yeah, Aaron Sorkin I can get with, and Kevin Smith though I find Kevin Smith pretty naturalistic, and Aaron Sorkin definitely more on the Kevin Williamson side. But I guess what Aaron Sorkin usually writes about and says, I have more. I just have
interest.
More interest. Yeah, interest and believability, and I think that contributes. Having said all this, I do like the movie. I just was surprised that it hit me in a different way than it ever did. Like, I just didn't appreciate it as much as I remembered appreciating it. And
I think where it works is I love the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a thing. Like, Scream is remembered as being this like self-referential meta movie.
Right.
But when it comes down to it, I rewatch Scream a lot, and I'm not a rewatcher.
No.
And the reason for that is I love Sidney Prescott, and I love Randy Meeks, and I love Billy Loomis, and I love Gale Weathers, and I love Dewey Riley. Like, I love those characters.
Yeah.
Like, this movie really hits me on an emotional level.
Really?
It does.
Like, you're invested in these people.
I'm upset when Tatum dies.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you think that the intention is that you're supposed to be upset or you're supposed to be laughing? Because the way she dies is it's such a, obvious nod to gruesome.
I think
ends.
you're supposed to be laughing, and you're supposed to feel shitty that you're laughing. And that's what I like about it.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I like the character of Sidney. I like David Arquette's character, Dewey. And I like Randy, and Matthew Lillard has some funny lines.
Matthew Lillard, by the way, is great in this movie.
Yeah, he's one of the best parts of the movie. I mean, he genuinely made me laugh several times. But in terms of like caring about their outcome, I really don't, because I just.
Were you not like disappointed in Stu when he turned out to be a killer?
Well, I don't know. I mean, no, I don't know. I wasn't. I mean, now I've seen it several times, but I could tell you I don't remember being disappointed. I remember being surprised, and that's a very different feeling. I remember like being surprised. So yes, the movie fooled me, but no, I don't. I didn't have an emotional attachment to any of these people, and I think because I could just see the wink and the nod behind everything. So I just didn't. It's one of those things. What am I supposed to do here?
I think the movie's less winking than you think.
Yeah. Well, it may. I don't know. I mean, who's to say? I feel like this kind of movie puts itself on a different level of critique because of that whole thing.
Yeah, and that's interesting to me.
Because almost I looked through a lot of reviews, like even just more obscure ones. Like
I never look at reviews of horror movies.
Yeah, I was curious to see if anyone was feeling the way I felt, and it seemed like almost every review, first of all, was positive, and almost all of them, though, had a tinge of hesitation in criticizing anything they had a problem with, because every time they would go to, like, say something, then their following sentence would be like, but anyway, that's not really valid here because that's what they meant to do.
Yeah, that's a problem with these kinds of movies, because, a critic writing about it can sense, like, Kevin Williamson like responding, yes, but you see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So Scream. I have so many things that I've wanted to talk about forever about Scream.
Go ahead.
Do you mind indulging me just for a minute?
Absolutely, please.
Here's just some of my notes. In that opening scene, when they find Drew Barrymore dead, the dad says to the mom, drive down to the Mackenzies and call the police.
Mackenzie's. All right, I missed that one.
That's a line right at the end of Halloween. That's what Jamie Lee Curtis tells the kids.
Okay. All right.
Okay. I have a note here. Sweet Indigo Girls poster, Sydney. And I think that's intentional, because Sydney is supposed to be this very sort of virginal and closed off to Billy. And I think having the #1 lesbian folk band in the world out there is actually a choice.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I thought that was more of just like a 90s thing.
I think that's partly it, but like even by 96, the Indigo Girls, maybe Closer to Fine was a hit, whatever. The sheriff in Scream was a police officer in Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Holy God, yeah, I didn't catch that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Linda Blair pops up as a reporter.
I caught that.
Yeah. How about the Freddy Krueger reference?
Yeah, that was funny. That was Wes Craven, right?
That was Wes Craven making a cameo as
that.
Fred, the janitor.
Yeah, I like that. Sweater.
Yeah, there's one moment where Tatum tells Sydney, "You're starting to sound like a Wes Carpenter kind of movie."
Yeah.
And Kevin Williamson has said he was embarrassed about that line when Wes Craven got a hold of the script, but Craven insisted on leaving it in.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so much like that.
It's wall to wall.
It's wall to wall. I did want to just bring up multiple Sharon Stone and Basic Instinct references.
That was funny. Yeah.
Like, I forgot that. It's perfect that we're doing this after our last episode.
Yeah, that was really funny. I didn't remember that stuff at all.
Yeah.
Well, that's when I guess she was still like a name to reference at all.
Yeah, your mom was flashing her shit all over town like she was Sharon Stone or something. But let's face it, Sid, your mom was no Sharon Stone. You see, I can quote this movie. I can't quote anything.
And it's funny too because that's another thing where people today who are, I don't know, maybe if they're like 20 years old, they wouldn't even know what the hell they're talking about. Like Sharon who?
Yeah, I know. It's odd.
Yeah. And it's so funny because as much as Sharon Stone would have tried to shake, that image 4 years after Basic Instinct, she's still getting referenced for that movie. She had already won an Oscar for Casino, and she's still getting referenced for Basic Instinct.
That's all she is, and she knew it. That's why she did Basic Instinct too, dude.
Yeah.
The boyfriend at the beginning of the movie, Drew Barrymore's boyfriend, they keep going back and forth on his name. Is it Steve Forrest or Stephen Orth movie? You're annoying me. That's not for you. That's just something I've wanted to say publicly for 20 years.
Oh, say that again to me. What's happening?
The boyfriend of Drew Barrymore.
Yeah.
Early on in the movie, Tatum says Casey Becker and Steve Forrest got killed last night, and then later in the movie, someone else calls him Stephen Orth.
Oh.
And then in Scream 2, he's referenced again because it's a copycat killer, and they call him Stephen Orth. And I'm like, did Tatum just fuck up that? Like, did Rose McGowan fuck up that line and no one caught it?
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Boy, okay. Yeah, it's like a Nick Coran moment.
It is like that. Yeah, it's odd. It annoys me every time. But that's the first time he's referenced. So, like, to me, he's Steve Forrest, and then every time after that, they refer to him as Stephen Orth, and that's the fuck up.
Yeah.
Okay, how about the music in this movie? You're a music guy.
Yeah. Did nothing for me.
I love the score, and I think the songs are good. I think the songs in later Scream movies are mostly bad.
Yeah, they are.
But I like the songs in the first one.
Right.
Things like, I mean, it sets up Red Right Hand by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, which is used in I think all of them but the third, or all of them but the fourth. I think they skip one. Mm-hmm. But that's a great song, and it closes with a cover of Whisper to a Scream by the Icicle Works, which is one of my favorite songs of all time.
Wow.
Okay. So I love and picture credits. I love picture credits. You know that.
Yeah. The only music reference I only caught the Reaper, man. That's the only one I think I caught.
Well, that's the only one that's a horror reference. But I like the music. Youth of America is a song that's going into the party scene. I like that song quite a bit. It's a good soundtrack.
Yeah, the Beltrami score. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. And I know he's I think you said actually quite a long time ago. It's his first score.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel super horror-y.
Right, and that would to his credit, this would be a difficult movie to score because you're trying to be original / mimic. / be ironic and funny, but there's a lot of notes he has to hit here, no pun intended. So, I give him credit for pulling it off, but I don't remember anything from it. You know what I mean? However, I did do a little bit of research, and it was a really successful soundtrack.
Yeah, both the song soundtrack and the score soundtrack.
Yeah, which was interesting to me.
I owned the Scream 2 soundtrack. I'll put
The
that
song,
out there.
the songs, or the
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It had B-sides by the Foo Fighters and Everclear, which were two bands I liked at the time, and I bought it for those.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's Everclear.
Everclear. Hey, love that band. Shout out to Art Alexakis.
Is he the blonde? Is he the blonde guy?
Yeah, that's right.
I met him once in 2004 in
Oh, I
Boston.
bet he was a dick.
Yeah, he was at the Democratic Convention in Boston in 2004. I was outside with a couple of my friends, and we were just walking around while it was all happening. And he walked by, and I said to my friend, "I said, isn't that the dude from Everclear?" And yeah, I had nothing to say to him, but yeah, so I saw him.
He's a great man.
Guess he's a Democrat, so that's fine.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's rate the movie on our 1 to 5 scale.
Okay.
I give it a 5.
I give it a 3.
Yeah, okay.
I do have a superhero count.
Oh, who?
Well, had to kind of dig deep here, but it does count. Drew Barrymore was in Batman Forever.
Yes, as Sugar.
That's right.
Yeah, there was Sugar and Spice.
That's right.
Two-Faces ladies.
Oh, yeah.
And it's her and who's Spice? Do you remember?
I didn't look it up, but I think it's Debbie Mazar.
Oh, God. Debbie Mazar of the 90s.
That's her, right?
Yeah. She was the villain in Beethoven's Second.
Wow, I didn't see that. There's a villain in that movie?
Yeah. There's always villains in those Beethoven movies trying to, like, poach the dogs. In Beethoven's Second, the daughter, a dude tries to rape her, and Beethoven saves her.
Really?
Yes.
That's very dark.
Oh, we got to cover those on the podcast.
I guess. Yeah, we'll put that on the calendar at some point.
Yeah. Okay,
And, well,
MVP.
Wait, there's another superhero.
Oh, who?
Sabretooth.
Liev Schreiber, of course.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's Sabretooth in that Wolverine picture.
There you go.
In the first movie, he's a wrestler, I think.
He is?
Sabretooth in X-Men, like the original X-Men,
Yeah.
is a fellow named Tyler Mane.
Yeah.
He was a wrestler.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then Liev Schreiber picked up the role later on.
Okay, right, correct.
Liev Schreiber, by the way, I mean, a lot of movies claim to be trying to start franchises after they're successful.
Mm-hmm.
I think Scream was supposed to be a franchise always, because the second movie comes out less than a year after the first one, and Liev Schreiber is in a police car in this first movie with
he's in
no
nothing.
dialogue.
That's right.
And he's Liev Schreiber. He was already a thing.
I don't know. Was he? I don't know.
I remember when I saw Scream, I recognized Liev Schreiber, so he must have been in something before this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you said in the beginning that it was meant to be a franchise, pretty much, from Kevin Williamson's plotting.
Well, that was him pitching it, but
Right.
in practice,
Oh, that's true.
I don't know. But yeah, that lends credence to the fact that they always wanted to make a sequel and thought this movie would be successful.
Right.
And they were right. Okay, MVP for the first Scream movie, I have to go with Matthew Lillard.
I'm going to go with Neve Campbell.
She's great.
Yeah.
Matthew Lillard, just a couple of the lines that, fucking, my mom and dad are going to be so mad at me. And my favorite moment in all of Scream, which is going to be totally backwards to you because it's so just nothing, is, when Sydney's hiding from the killers and she calls them.
Mm-hmm.
Billy picks up the phone and talks to her like, "I want to kill you, you fucking bitch," or whatever.
Yeah.
And then he throws the phone when he's finished talking to her, when he goes to look for her.
Right.
And Matthew Lillard goes, "Why'd you hit me with the phone, dick?" That's my favorite moment in Scream.
Yeah, no, he's got. I liked the scene in Blockbuster. I thought he's got a lot of funny stuff going on in there. Him and Randy.
Yes,
that whole exchange.
that is very, very good.
I like that a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah. My
With
LVP.
only Miramax movies in the background of that blockbuster.
Oh, I didn't notice
Yes.
that. That's great. That's a nice touch. My LVP is Skeet Ulrich. I can't stand
I
him.
think he works in this movie. I think
Yeah.
he's not a good actor, but I think he's Billy Loomis. I can't see anybody else being Billy Loomis.
He's a clone. He's a cloned stepchild in a laboratory of Johnny Depp. He's terrible. He's like a worse version of what Christian Slater is doing in Heathers, aping Jack Nicholson.
I think it's fine. Yeah, he's doing for Johnny Depp what Christian Slater did for Jack Nicholson for sure.
Yeah.
My LVP is the cheerleader in the bathroom who's talking shit about Nev Campbell's mom.
All right.
That actress was dating Skeet Ulrich at the time of
Is
filming.
that right?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So there you go.
Okay.
Less than a year later, we have Scream 2. Craven's back. Williamson's back. This film was released December 12th, 1997. A budget of $24 million. Still cheap, but they gave him a little bit more money to play with. And that's why you get car chases in this movie for no reason. And the box office, $172.3 million. Basically exactly what Scream made. People came back.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah.
Um,
That's huge.
That's a big hit. It's a big hit. Scream was such a big hit that Tomorrow Never Dies, the Bond movie, and Titanic both moved their release dates to avoid Scream 2.
I read that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty amazing. I mean, a James Bond movie and Titanic. I mean, wow. The worried about this sequel.
I was such a big fan of Scream by Scream 2. I once I got it on VHS, I watched the shit out of it. And around the time of Scream 2's release, I was digging through the T-shirt racks at Sam Goody. And they had a T-shirt that was the Scream 2 poster, and I bought it.
That's awesome.
Still own it.
You do?
Yep.
Wow. I don't think I own anything from 20 years ago.
I wore
That's-
it recently on a cocaine binge.
Oh, I can't top that. What am I supposed to say to that? Wow.
You can't. Okay.
What are you, Ellis from Die Hard 1? Jeez.
Ooh, good ref. Yeah, Ellis. Fuck, that's a good reference. Okay, Scream 2. This is a movie. We come up. This 1 year later after the events of the first movie. Probably the first sequel in history where it came out probably before the characters even were at their point in the movie.
Yeah.
Sydney's in college. Randy's at the same college. And then some copycat murders start happening. And Gale and Dewey descend on town as well. And we get a whole new cast of characters, but the body count is much larger in Scream 2, so we don't get to know these characters as well, and it's a problem.
Oh, okay.
I like Scream 2. I think it's mostly a good, satisfying sequel to Scream, but there's characters in this movie like Derek, who's Jerry O'Connell, and Hallie, her roommate, her black roommate. There's black people in this one. And Timothy Olyphant. By the way,
Yeah.
Timothy Olyphant, first actor crossing over franchises on this podcast.
Oh, is that right? Do we not? Is that the first
I
one?
think so.
Wow.
And
Okay.
those characters are just not defined enough.
Mhm.
And it's because we spend so much time on some of the murder sequences.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that Sarah Michelle Gellar sequence is pretty well directed, I think, but it's a good chunk of the movie, and it doesn't really matter at all.
No, it's very long,
Yeah.
and it has kind of it's basically the Drew Barrymore sequence just done again.
No. Well, kind of, but there's also the opening sequence of this movie, which is trying to sort of top the Drew Barrymore sequence.
Right. Was the opening of this sequence self-consciously playing like the joke of like that now people make about how the black characters always die first? Do you think, or
Yeah,
is
this is
that
another-
not even there yet?
No. This is another one of those cases like you were talking about earlier, where it's a joke about horror movies that the film is trying to make that now you see fucking all the time, but at the time was somewhat original.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, no. The opening of this movie is Jada Pinkett, she hadn't been smithed yet, and Omar Epps, and they are going to go see the film Stab, which is an adaptation of Gale Weathers' book,
Right.
which is about the events of the first Scream movie.
Right.
And, they get killed in that movie theater, but they go into it and they are referencing I'm sorry, Katie? Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, they're referencing that stereotype. And the joke is that they're talking about how black people always get killed first in horror movies, and then they get killed first.
Right.
In Scream 2.
Oh, that's right. They say it. I couldn't even remember that they said it. Yeah. Okay.
Jada Pinkett made a Sandra Bullock reference. Did you get hard?
Yeah. Oh, you're unbelievable. Yeah, several times they bring up her name, which is funny too, because it's 97. I guess she was. Yeah, that was like her. That was her like Speed, Practical Magic.
Yeah. Down the street, they say there's a Sandra Bullock movie playing. It was probably 2 If by Sea.
Right. There's always in the late 90s. It was probably always a Sandra Bullock movie playing.
Yeah. So, yeah, what'd you think of the opening sequence?
It was that and the discussion in the class in the sequel. This discussion about sequels.
Yes.
Those were the only 2 scenes in the movie that I found entertaining in any kind of way.
Well, those were the 2 that are most directly commenting on the genre. The way the first film does. I like that classroom sequence a lot with Joshua Jackson showing up for no reason.
Yeah, that was funny. Yeah.
And just to give you a little background on that, Dawson's Creek premieres less than a month after Scream 2 comes out. Okay. But it's already filming at the time Scream 2 is being made. Mm-hmm. And Kevin Williamson created Dawson's Creek, and that's his baby. Like it's an autobiographical show,
right?
And so he got Joshua Jackson into this movie. But there were reports at the time that Kevin Williamson was trying to write and rewrite Scream 2 so fast to get it to this release date, mm-hmm. and working on Dawson's Creek at the same time that Miramax hired bodyguards to stand outside Kevin Williamson's office door and make sure he was in there working on Scream 2.
Is that real?
That's true.
What would they have done if he would have come out?
They would have said, "Sorry, buddy, go back in. We need those pages. We need those sweet pages."
Wow.
Bro. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
I know.
Jeez, I've never heard of anything like that.
Yeah. All right. So Scream 2. What'd you think of it?
I didn't like it. It's just more of the same, but less skillful, and just kind of at this point already for me, it was just boring. I didn't have any interest in continuing any of the characters. I also thought it was funny how, at the end of the first Scream, what's her name, Gale Weathers?
Yeah, that's the Courtney Cox character.
Yeah, she's supposedly, I thought, kind of come around to being more of a sympathetic human being. And
she is more of a sympathetic human being in Scream 2, but she's not there yet.
Well, right, but I thought by the end of the first one she was there. That was kind of the whole thing. She saves the day. She's, her cameraman gets killed, and then in this she's right back to square one, being obnoxious. And
I don't think she's back at square one. I think she's made some progress in the first movie, and then she's more likable in Scream 2, but she's not. In the first movie, she's a villain.
Yeah.
In the second movie, she's not.
No, because that's true. Because she has a lot of scenes with Dewey that are sensitive and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
And we see her smoking cigarettes, though, so she can't. She's not a total hero.
Yeah, we're 97, so we're about in the final stages of Hollywood allowing that kind of.
No,
behavior.
I think now we're at by 97. We're not letting our hero, like Sidney Prescott, couldn't smoke cigarettes in this movie.
Oh, okay.
But I
All
think
right.
Gail Weathers is a bit of an anti-hero.
Right.
She's still allowed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
What did you think of the Jamie Kennedy rules scene in the original movie?
It's it's funny. I mean, I liked it. It's obviously perceptive and accurate and meant to be and not subtle. But I don't think it's supposed to be subtle. It is what it is. It works.
To me, the best joke of it is when they cut back to the van,
Mm-hmm.
and it's Gail and her cameraman, played by the great W. Earl Brown from Deadwood.
Okay.
They're watching the footage and they're remarking on how boring it is.
That was good.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, that was good.
But I bring that sequence up only to bring up the sequence where he has some rules about sequels.
Right.
He has that scene with Dewey
Yes.
in the second movie, which was the trailer.
Oh, really?
The trailer was just that scene.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. That's creative, though, to just use that as a trailer.
Yeah, it was cool. It got me fucking pumped.
Yeah. Yeah.
What'd you think of that?
It was okay. It's just kind of a redoing what he did, but I mean, I guess it was a necessary sequence. I the logic he's using is funny, and it's funny because it's like legitimate. The things he's saying that would happen in sequels, and how they're trying to use that to figure out who did it. I like that.
But he says, like, one of the rules of the sequels is the body count has to be bigger.
Right.
And
right.
I don't necessarily think that's true. And I think that's a case with sequels. And I think that's partly the problem with Scream 2 is they try to follow those rules. And they'd be better off doing what they did in that first one.
Yeah, it was interesting.
There were very few murders in that first movie. After Casey and Steve get killed in those first 15 minutes, like, nobody else dies. Until, like, Henry Winkler, maybe?
Oh, I didn't think of that. So there's really not that many actual deaths.
Yeah,
You
that's
got
why
Wink-
I think of that first one more as a whodunit, whereas the second one, you can't really guess who's the killer because we don't know the characters well enough. So
Well, I
it is
did.
more of just a horror movie. Did you really?
Yeah, and I've never seen this before.
Both of them?
No,
Who'd you
No.
guess?
Timothy Oliphant.
Okay. That's
because-
interesting because the other one, and I know I'm talking over you, but I have so much to say about the Scream movies.
Yeah, I know.
The Debbie Salt, a.k.a. Mrs. Loomis, Laurie Metcalf, was always meant to be the killer in this movie, and Timothy Oliphant wasn't. That was changed in rewrites.
Oh. Yeah, well, it actually wasn't really great deduction on my part. It was simply that he's walking around the entire time with a camera. And there was just something suspect about that. He's filming everything. And I just said, well, there's something weird going on here.
It's fishy.
And, yeah, very fishy. And since all they keep talking about are, the fame and all that Cotton wants to do is get famous off of the first one, even though he's innocent, it's a lot of fame talk in here. It's like, I think OJ's referenced a few times. And so I just kind of figured,
That's it. That's a good call, and that's an interesting thing about this movie. Maybe the most interesting thing about this movie, if I'm being honest, is it is a lot about fame. I really like Timothy Oliphant's monologue at the end, where he reveals himself to be the killer, and he says, "These days you gotta have a trial."
Right.
Like, it's all about the trial.
Right.
And he says he's going to hire Dershowitz or Cochran to
Yep.
represent him. And it's so crazy because this is like 1997. So we're OJ's still fresh in everybody's minds. And they refer to OJ in this movie explicitly as a murderer, which is not really a thing that was happening yet.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Did they actually said that?
Yes, and I mean, Norm Macdonald was doing it at SNL, but
Oh,
it
my
kind
God.
of got him fired.
It did. Totally got him fired.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing they're doing in this movie, and they also reference Bob Dole.
Oh, yeah, that was
He
weird.
said we're gonna have Bob Dole on the witness stand representing us
I didn't even understand that reference.
because
Espe-
the 1996 election
Yeah.
was they talked so much about censorship.
Oh,
And so
wow.
Bob Dole would have supported an argument from a serial killer, like blaming it on the movie.
And it's funny because I'm a political junkie, needless to say, as you know, and I remember that presidential race pretty well, and I don't remember censorship being a big. But I guess it was.
It was
yeah.
a big hot button issue, and Clinton was thought to be too liberal, and they talked about a lot about Tipper Gore's thing with like the music industry.
Yeah, but that was like a
saying,
decade before.
No, I know, but that was sort of their defense. Like, see, we do censor things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting thing. So you guessed Timothy Olyphant, but not Laurie Metcalf.
No, but when it was her, I wasn't shocked. It made perfect sense because her character throughout the movie is just this, impinging, annoying presence to Courtney Cox, and why else would she really be there if she needs to be around the campus so much? So when she showed up, and then they tie it in with being Loomis's mother, it wasn't that surprising. But no, I didn't guess it. I mean, the movie. I'll give the movie this. It has you guessing. There are many people that could have been the killers. I mean, so I was going back and forth from.
Yeah, but I think that's kind of the problem with it. Like,
Yeah.
The first movie was a whodunit, and they knew
Right.
that. I owned the original Scream screenplay. And there's a scene in the original screenplay before the party that shows Billy Loomis and Stu, like, they meet up. Like, it's just a scene with the two of them, like, sort of at dusk, right before the party, and they're, like, sort of talking in oblique terms about what's going to go down later tonight.
Yeah.
And it sort of reveals them as the killer an hour into the movie.
Oh,
And
boy.
I think Wes Craven was smart enough to cut that.
Yeah.
Because that you can't do that.
Right.
And I think the problem with Scream 2 is you it's hard to guess who the killers are, but it's only because we don't know the characters.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, in the first movie, you really have no idea, what the hell's going on. You don't know who it could be. You don't know, also principally, which is actually one of the things I liked about the first movie, that you don't. I at least wasn't expecting, when I first saw it, that there would be two of them.
Yeah, same here.
That's a neat idea. And in this one, I kind of went in already figuring, well, there's going to be two killers. I just have to figure out who the two are.
Yeah.
And once I guessed Timothy, I just didn't know who the other one was, but it wasn't surprising.
I
at
think
the
it's
end.
smart that it's a woman, and I think the Billy Loomis's mother idea is actually pretty good.
Is that a thing also to a reference to Friday the 13th?
Yo, yeah. And it's reverse, because in Friday the 13th,
Right.
Mrs. Voorhees is the killer in the first movie, and then Jason avenges her in the second movie. In Scream, Billy's the killer in the first movie, and then his mother avenges him.
Right.
That's, I think, an interesting flip.
Yeah. That's
Gender
creative.
flip.
Yeah.
You have anything else to say about Scream 2?
I just thought towards the end it went a little off the rails for me. It just was a little too. It just kind of went on and on with the stabbing and the shooting and the hanging and the blood and the like.
How'd you feel about the device of the play?
I mean, it's a nice setting to have it in there. The Oedipus thing was a neat way to show her, Nev Campbell, freaking out. Seeing all the masks, all the Greek chorus masks. And
He
all
was
that.
there, though. He was there, bro.
Right.
He was there.
Yeah.
I was such a Scream nerd that on VHS, I ran that scene in slow-mo.
You wanted to see if she was actually seeing the mask.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
he was there. You could see his feet scurrying away.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't catch it, nor did I try to.
Oh, who could give a shit? I'm such an idiot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that the stage is less of an interesting setting than the party at the sort of farm kind of house in the first
Yeah.
one, but it works okay for me. Can I just bring up some things that I've always wanted to say about Scream 2?
Obviously.
My favorite musical cue in this movie is the Dewey theme. There's a theme that plays every time Dewey is on screen, and it is not by Marco Beltrami. It was a placeholder that they ended up liking that is a bit of Hans Zimmer score from the movie Broken Arrow.
I read that Hans Zimmer and Danny Elfman cues were used in this.
Well, Danny Elfman, it's not a cue. It's a song Danny Elfman wrote, and that's the thing they're using in the play that Sydney is in.
Oh,
But
okay.
that just like Dewey has a theme when he's sort of on screen, and that's from Broken Arrow.
Oh my God, that's funny.
I
I didn't
know.
know it was from that. Jeez,
Yeah, that's crazy.
that is crazy.
Early on in the movie, we see someone interviewing Cotton Weary on television.
All right.
That's Kevin Williamson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What'd you think of Liev Schreiber in this movie?
He's tied for my MVP in the movie.
He's very, very good.
Yes, he is.
He might be my MVP. I really like him in this movie.
He's tied with Luke Wilson.
Oh my God. Fucking Luke Wilson. Okay, so we see scenes.
That was my favorite part of the movie.
We see scenes from Stab,
Yeah.
which is it's basically Scream, right?
Right.
It's a movie that's doing the events of Scream. And we see Heather Graham doing the Drew Barrymore part, the same year as Boogie Nights. We see Tori Spelling doing the Sydney part, which is a reference to a line from Scream. And then we see Luke Wilson as Billy Loomis less than a year after Bottle Rocket came out.
That's a good point. Oh, that was so funny. That was my favorite part of the movie. That 20-second scene where he's got like the Skeet Ulrich hair.
He's so good. He's
Oh, so
funny.
funny.
The best
Oh,
is the
God.
end of the scene where, at the end of that scene in the actual movie Scream, Billy Loomis just goes stupid, and Luke Wilson says stupid, but he smacks himself on the head when he says it.
That was absolutely the best part of that movie for me.
Great. The worst part of the movie is Jerry O'Connell singing "I Think I Love You."
Oh my God, that was a what were they thinking moment for me.
The first time Katie had never seen this movie before, my girlfriend, and I showed her Scream 2, and I forgot about that part, and I got so embarrassed that I tried to like talk during it, like I did like a check-in, like how you like in the movie, and she saw right through it. Yeah. Oh, and it's long and terrible. Jerry O'Connell, probably my LVP of this film.
Interesting.
I actually like Jerry O'Connell as a comedic actor, but that's not what he's being asked to do in this movie.
Right.
And I do not like him as a romantic lead.
Yeah. So your MVP is Liev Schreiber.
Let's get to that. I have to think about it.
Oh, okay, that's
I didn't
fine.
write down who my.
Oh, all right. I hadn't been, and now I do. So I.
And my last thing about this movie is,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
At one point, Timothy Oliphant says, "I like what's going on here, Sid. You got a real Linda Hamilton thing going on."
That was very funny.
And she kind of does, doesn't she?
She does.
Isn't Sydney kind of like just tougher in this movie?
She is tougher, and she even has like a not that she looks like Linda Hamilton, but she's kind of got those chiseled jawline features of Linda Hamilton, so she kind of can pull that off, like a tough as nails type thing happening. So it worked. Yeah, that was good.
She is. Unfortunately, she's a little bit underused in both Scream 3 and Scream 4. I think Sydney takes a back seat from being the leads of these movies. But I think performance-wise, Scream 2 might actually be her best showing.
Oh, okay. All right. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like her with the shorter hair, too.
I like the longer hair.
Oh! Whatever. We're brothers. We have different taste in the ladies. Okay. Scream 2. I'll give it 4 stars out of 5.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't sound like a 4-star discussion, but all right. I'm giving it 2.
Yeah, well, you gave the first one 3, I guess, so that's sort of what I figured.
Yeah, I mean it's not unwatchable, but it's pretty close. So, and I'm giving. I already said my MVP was Liev Schreiber, tied with Luke Wilson, and my LVP might surprise you.
Okay.
Jada Pinkett.
Oh, I think Jada Pinkett's good in this movie.
She's just really annoying. Just
Well,
really annoying.
she's yelling at the screen in that theater. I don't like that.
I don't like that either.
I'll give MVP to David Arquette, actually.
Okay.
I think Dewey, I love him in that first one. Another one of my favorite moments of the first one is when they're talking to the killer and they sort of leave the phone off the hook. And David Arquette walks in with a gun and picks up the phone and just goes, "Hello." And that's the end of the scene. That's great. But I think in the second one, like sort of like badly bruised both in the heart and sort of physically, like he's great. And you know, and I like his sort of faux death scene.
Yeah.
And you got to give props to Jamie Kennedy too, because he's really fucking good and funny. In both of these movies. And did you feel it at all when he died?
No, but I think it was probably a mistake because now I haven't watched Scream 3 and 4 yet, but I might miss his character.
You need that voice of the audience.
Yeah, I mean he's kind of what kept those two on a certain level, and now he's gone. So you know that's too bad.
Heather Matarazzo shows up in that third one as his sister.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh okay.
But I always wondered whether, because I know Randy was always going to be killed in this one. Now that was something they decided they were going to do because it was the death that would mean the most.
Mm-hmm.
And I always wondered, because Timothy Olyphant wasn't always supposed to be the killer.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if he was going to be set up for the third one to sort of be Randy.
If Timothy Olyphant was going to take over that type of
that sort of presence.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I always kind of wondered that.
Well, he is the guy with the camera, and I mean, he could have been. Who knows? Yeah.
But he's the killer. So yeah, the third movie doesn't have that as much, but then the fourth movie does something very, very different from the first three. So we'll cover those movies next week on the Frandroid.
Yes, we will.
LVP. What LVP for me? Jerry O'Connell. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you kind of have to, for the way you felt about that Partridge Family scene.
Yeah. And then in the closing credits of the movie, Less Than Jake has a cover of "I Think I Love You."
Yeah.
It was on the soundtrack. I owned it.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Yeah. There's also a song in this movie by D'Angelo that is written by Prince.
Really?
But it's during the period, the artist formerly known as Prince period. So if you stick around long enough in the closing credits, you get to see that symbol.
Oh, that's wow! That's in the. I never occurred to me.
Yeah, it's like performed by D'Angelo, written by that thing.
Written by an ampersand doing a cartwheel.
That's your best line in the history of this podcast. Okay, tune in next week. We're talking Scream 3 by Wes Craven, written by Aaron Kruger. Can I just say something right off the bat about Aaron Kruger?
Sure.
He was a hot new screenwriter at the time. Do you know why?
Nope.
He had a spec script that was currently being made when Scream 3 was being made. They thought was going to be a huge hit. You know what that spec script was?
What was that spec script? Yeah, what was it?
A little film called Reindeer Games.
Not John Frankenheimer's best moment either.
Nope.
Wow.
Okay, so we'll see Aaron Kruger fuck up Scream 3. Spoilers. And then Kevin Williamson come back to rescue the franchise, not commercially, but certainly creatively.
That's all right. I just screwed up.
I know. We're losing our minds.